Hey everyone, and welcome to Unchained's Continuing Education webinar series, where we are here to help you grow your Bitcoin knowledge to be fully sovereign in your Bitcoin wealth. My name is Justine Harper, and I'm the VP of Business Development at Unchained Capital. And today I'm joined by Tyler Campbell, our VP of Concierge and Technical Director, and Connor Dett, Director at Client Solutions. And today we're talking all about them keys. As we know, self-custody is a critical part of holding Bitcoin, and how to properly store those keys is something we need to be thinking about. But it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Bitcoin is a journey, and so is self-custody. So today we'll be walking you through how to start improving your security with simple steps. We'll be starting with overview of components in your multi-sig setup so that you know what each of those pieces are that you are trying to protect. We'll be selecting a secure location, talking about what is a secure location and what is not. Stages of securing your Bitcoin keys. Again, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can start with a bare minimum and work up to maximum security. And then we're going to go through best practices for physical key storage, and then some action items that you can take away with and start making those changes today. So to get started, let's go ahead and overview the components in your multi-sig setup. So it's important to remember that today's focus is going to be on individuals holding their Bitcoin in a multi-sig collaborative custody with Unchained Capital. So we're going to walk through what that looks like and what those components are. So to get started, let's note that with Unchained Collaborative Custody, you are holding a 2 of 3 multi-sig, where you hold 2 keys and Unchained holds 1. This means that you can always spend or transfer Bitcoin outside of Unchained Capital, but we're there to help you in case anything happens, and we can't move your Bitcoin without you. So with Unchained Collaborative Custody, to move or spend, 2 keys are needed to sign a transaction. And what that looks like depends on what you're trying to do. So you can use your 2 keys and sign on your own via Unchained's website. You can use one of your keys and request Unchained to use its key as the second signature. Or if you want to transfer your Bitcoin without accessing Unchained's website, you'll need your wallet configuration file, which we'll go over in a minute, your 2 keys, and our open source multi-sig coordinator, Caravan, or another multi-sig software such as Sparrow. Unchained's collaborative custody model means you can lose access to 3 of the 4 keys and still recover your funds. But it's really, really important to remember that if you lose all 4 items, Unchained cannot help you recover your funds, and your Bitcoin will be permanently lost. And this makes how to store those keys an important thing you need to consider, and why we are focusing this whole webinar on that today. But before we dive into the how to secure these items, let's do a quick review of what these items are and the role that they play in your Bitcoin custody solution. So let's talk about what is involved in this 2 of 3 multi-sig setup. First, you have your Bitcoin private keys, right? This is how you sign transactions, proving ownership and being able to move those funds. Remember, we talked about that it's a 2 of 3 multi-sig and you need 2 keys to sign. You as an individual are holding 2 keys while Unchained holds 1. But what do those keys look like in your setup? So those 2 keys are represented as 2 signing devices or hardware wallets and 2 seed phrases or physical backups. But what does that mean? So your hardware wallet or signing device, they are used to physically sign a transaction in combination with some sort of wallet software like Caravan, your Unchained account website, or something like Sparrow. This secures your private keys offline, and it also can populate new private keys. Bitcoin does not live on this device, though. That's really important to remember, right? Rather, the keys to your Bitcoin live here, and it's 1 key per device. Now, seed phrase, that's essentially your physical backup of the key that that device is holding. It is extremely, extremely important to keep a physical backup of this because hardware fails, right? They can malfunction, you can do a firmware update, it can wipe. So you are going to be holding backups for each of the keys that that device actually secures. It is a physical representation, and it can be transferred into multiple different signing device or hardware wallets. You never ever want to store these digitally or give access to them to an outside individual, as they are the key to your Bitcoin, which Connor will get into a little bit more later. Now, what is this wallet configuration file you may hear about? Well, the important thing with Bitcoin is that you are sovereign in your Bitcoin wealth. Now, if you're using Unchained Capital's website, this is not something you have to worry about because Unchained already stores this information behind the scenes. But if you want to go outside of Unchained and actually access your Bitcoin, because remember, your Bitcoin multi-sig is living out there in the Bitcoin network, it's not living in an account with Unchained Capital. So you can access it from anywhere. But to do so, you need to know where it lives, where it is, and therefore you need a map. So your wallet configuration file acts as a treasure map to your multi-sig wallet quorum. It includes needed information to rebuild the wallet in a wallet coordination tool like Caravan or Sparrow, and needed and sovereign recovery with your multi-sig setup. So it's something that you would want to download from your Unchained account. Very easy to do. You can get some more information about that on our website. And then you will store this somewhere securely, which we'll talk a little bit about later. Then this wallet software. It's important to note that wallet software is just something that you are using to interact with your Bitcoin address in conjunction with your Bitcoin keys to sign the transaction. It is a coordinator or wallet interface, and it is simply just a tool. It helps you interact. And you can use it with many different viewers, meaning that you can use different wallet softwares to interact with your address. It doesn't have to be one. If you start a multi-sig setup on something like Caravan, you can then see it elsewhere. Same as if you start a multi-sig setup on Sparrow, you could use that and see it elsewhere. So that covers the components of your Bitcoin multi-sig setup with Unchained Capital. Now that we kind of have the foundation of what these things are and the role that they play, let's go into what is a secure location. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Connor.
Thank you, Justine, and welcome everyone. Love to see the chat firing off this early. And one extra note, as Justine mentioned with that configuration file in Caravan, is really to hammer home the idea that at no point in time does Unchained want to be a single point of failure for you, even if we're not around it. And so let's talk about a secure location. And so there's many ways that you have avenues to secure these actual backup seed words. And one thing I want to mention, with the recent LastPass hack, right, we've had a lot of clients hint that, for convenience aspect, I'll keep it on this cloud-based password manager. That way, if I have access to the internet, I can get access to my seed words. And we recommend against that, right? If your seed words are accessed to the internet or are stored with a third party, right, that is a vulnerability to your security model. And we're talking about a hard asset. And so we recommend that you store these backup seed words in 2 locations. And you don't want to put these seed words in any kind of plain sight, right? I like to think of it, there has to be some sort of barrier of entry to get access to these seed words. And more importantly, you don't want to keep them in the same physical location, right? You want to make sure you geographically separate them. And Tyler's going to talk about, what's the best practices of these locations and how to store these seed words. And so what I'm going to do from there is I'm going to pass it off to Tyler and let him take it from here.
Yeah, of course. So just kind of going off of, what Connor had mentioned is, where not to store your private key items, right? You don't want to be using a password manager. You don't want to be co-locating all your items in one place. But what is a secure location? Well, that's going to be a safe at your home or a safe at your office. Could be a bank safety deposit box. Could be a family member's safe, right? That's part of, the inheritance consideration with our inheritance protocol, using, the residence of a trusted friend or family member. Could be a second residence that you own, right? There's secure locations, keeping in mind exactly what Connor said, barrier to entry, so they're not just out in plain view. And then, of course, somewhere that's not digital, right? Not like a password manager. Some wallets out there might even prompt you to keep a cloud backup of your seed phrase. Absolutely something we recommend against, right? We want to keep your seed phrases physically secured, because that's going to end up giving you, obviously, the most confidence, but of course, the most security in your setup. Really important point here too, that bottom bullet point, if necessary, you can use separate coordinates at your primary locations. Let's say I don't have a vacation house just yet, and I'm just using my home. Well, if I need to store 2 private key items in my house, I just don't want to put them together, right? I could have a lockbox in my garage. I could then have my home safe. Those are still 2 separate locations within my primary residence, right? So there's a lot of subjectivity going on in all of this stuff, but you do want to be thinking about, think adversarially, think, okay, what I don't want to do is put both of my hardware wallets in one, box underneath the kitchen sink, right? So there's a bunch of different ways you can think about this. A lot of it does boil down to common sense as well. So what I want to do now is really take a dive into the stages of securing your private key items, right? Your Bitcoin keys, as Justine was covering, you have your hardware wallet, you have your seed phrase backup, Those two together represent one key, and you have two keys. So ultimately, you do have four things that you need to protect. And with that, we understand that security is an evolution, right? Updating your security posture is something that you can work toward. It's not like overnight you can have, a magical solution that makes you impervious to all sorts of attacks. But what you can do by following just some general guidelines is put yourself in a fantastic position right away and then grow from there as you learn more. So what I'm going to start with here is thinking about our first step. Then I'm going to go to our middle ground where we're thinking about, okay, I've done the first step, but how can I get more secure? Then we're going to climb the mountain, get all the way to the top, talk about maximum security, right? One separate place for each of those private key items. So for each one of these different stages, I'm going to kind of show you a nice picture diagram where we can talk through each stage. So again, first step, that middle ground, and then maximum security. So to kind of take a deeper dive into that first step, I know that text might be a little bit small if you're viewing on the live storm, so let me go ahead and take that core message of the first step, make it a little bit bigger for you. So first step, bare minimum security. What you can do as a first step, say you were onboarded, concierge onboarded yesterday, and you still have all of your private key items with you, or you were onboarded a year ago. You know who you are. I'm looking at you. You still have everything with you in your primary residence, right by your office desk. You just haven't taken the steps to separate things. The very minimal first step you can do that eliminates single points of failure in your setup is take one seed phrase backup and secure it as a secondary location. What that does is that eliminates your primary residence being a single point of failure. If there was a natural disaster or a burglary or something terrible were to happen, if you have one seed phrase backup at a secondary location, you could use that to recover your Bitcoin. You could load that seed phrase backup into a signing device or hardware wallet. You could use the Unchained key as your second key and access your Bitcoin. So at a minimum, taking that first step of taking one seed phrase backup and separating it from the rest of the elements in your setup, that's a really low-hanging fruit, awesome thing to do. And really, if you're thinking about inheritance as well, inheritance, setting an inheritance setup using our inheritance protocol, that's a really nice way to accomplish that first step. You're copying down a seed phrase, putting it in a tamper-proof bag, and separating it from yourself, right? You're giving it to your executor of your estate. So first step, one seed phrase separated. Now, that eliminates a single point of failure, but somebody could still come to your house, right? They demand that you give them both of your signing devices, both your hardware wallets, and maybe even ask you for your PIN too. There's still that physical attack to be thinking of. So what I want to think about here is, okay, how can we get even better than a first step, right? I've separated one seed phrase from the rest of the elements of my setup. What do I do next? How can I keep climbing that security mountain? So when we think about what you could do after separating just one seed phrase backup, what we really get into is like a middle ground. And so what I'm going to cover next is just a few different options that you can deploy as a part of your security posture. And I'm going to go through two options, specifically options A and B, and it's not like one is better than the other necessarily. It really just depends on what are your goals? What are you optimizing for? So this middle ground area, after you separate one seed phrase backup, what I want to talk about now is storing two items at a secondary location, right? Instead of just one seed phrase backup, maybe it's two seed phrase backups. Maybe it's one hardware wallet and its seed phrase in the secondary location, right? What are you optimizing for? This option A here in the diagram that you're looking at, in this instance, we're going to optimize for you to be sovereign with your Bitcoin. We're going to say, hey, you know what? I don't want to have to trust Unchained's key to always be there, but I still want to separate my items. What I want to do is I'm going to optimize for me being able to sovereignly recover my Bitcoin, not rely on Unchained. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to place both of my devices, both my hardware wallets are going to be at my house in a safe, maybe separated within my house, and then both of my seed phrase backups are going to be somewhere else. So what I'm doing there is I'm not needing to rely on Unchained. If I need to move Bitcoin in a pinch, deposit collateral to a loan, right? I need to use my signing devices. They're right here with me and I can do that. Now, while that's nice and you're still separating the elements of your setup, what rears its head again is the physical attack, right? Same thing we talked about in the first step. Somebody could come to your door, you have both of your signing devices, or even at your secondary location, you'd have both of your seed phrase backups. In that situation, you have that physical attack as something that is not being optimized for. What is being optimized for is your ability not to have to rely on Unchained and your ability to sign for transactions quickly. But if you want to protect against that physical attack, what you could do is an option B. So the option B is going to be protecting you against a physical attack. That's keeping one key, so you have your device, your hardware wallet, and its backup in one location, and your other hardware wallet and its seed phrase backup in a secondary location. What that does is it optimizes for that person knocking on your door, demanding putting you in harm's way, demanding both of your keys, and you can just say, well, I only have one key, right? That physical attack is not going to compromise your Bitcoin. But what you would need to rely on in terms of sovereign recovery, being able to access your Bitcoin even quickly, is you would need the Unchained key, so you don't have both of your hardware wallets, both of your signing devices, possibly within close proximity of each other. So you're optimizing against that physical attack, but you still need to rely on your collaborative custodian, Unchained in this instance, in a setup like this. So making use of two secure locations and separating your keys in different ways really depends at the end of the day, again, on what you're optimizing for. And when I think about my Bitcoin wealth and how I secure Bitcoin for myself, I don't need to move a lot of Bitcoin, especially out of my multisig. I'm holding and saving, and it's my thesis that I'm going to be saving Bitcoin for a very long time. So I just want the maximum security. I just want, hey, what can I do to have my setup as secure as possible? And so for me, I make use of the maximum security model. And this one's going to look a little bit different from the other ones we've been talking about. In this model, each element of your setup, each private key item, either your hardware wallet or your two seed phrases, each element is in its own physical secure location. So you could have any of those options that we talked about earlier: home safe, office safe, safety deposit box, family member or friend's residence, right? Making use of 4 locations, 1 location for each one of those items, that's going to put you in a position where you're really eliminating all single points of failure, right? If there were 3 of those locations compromised, right, which is a pretty crazy scenario right off the bat. Let's say there's, how could it be that a fire and a flood and a burglary affect 3 of your 4 scenarios? Well, in this maximum security model, all of that stuff can happen and you're still okay. If you have one lone secure location that has a seed phrase, you could then work with your collaborative custodian with Unchained to secure your Bitcoin. So this maximum security model with 4 items separated is going to give you that confidence. Now, again, want to talk about the flip side of it. What's the trade-off? If you want to move your Bitcoin, it might be a hassle for you to drive from, sign your transaction with one of your signing devices with one hardware wallet, then drive over to your other location and sign with that hardware wallet as well. Could be a little bit more cumbersome, especially if you need to move Bitcoin quickly, depositing collateral or something like that. You lost in fantasy football and now you got to pay your league dues. Doing so quickly, this model might not be the most advantageous for you. But if you're securing Bitcoin wealth for the long haul, maximum security, separating your elements is going to be the absolute best thing that you can do. So I know we covered a lot right there, and these graphics are kind of interesting to consider, and it's not like I cover a slide in a minute and that's the one you want to go with, right? I think to that end, our team, concierge team, our content marketing team, our product team, we really put our heads together to put together an operational security guide that walks through all of this stuff, that evaluates the trade-offs, and it's out there on our blog. We're going to link it into the chat as well. Definitely suggest you give that a run through. When it comes to your Bitcoin security, it's never too late, right? Even if you were onboarded a year ago, you set yourself up a year ago and you haven't moved things, second best time to start doing so is now, and following that security guide really is going to put you in a good spot. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Connor to touch just a little bit more about best practices for physical key storage now that we've covered those stages of how you can secure your keys. So Connor, over to you.
Thank you, Tyler. Great job, and appreciate the kick save earlier that way. But let's talk about best practices for physical key storage, right? You can imagine the different walks of life we've seen on these concierge onboardings and these consultations, right? Different ages, different geographical backgrounds, different technical backgrounds. And so we've seen every scenario. And we find that adding extra security to those seed phrases is make them weatherproof, right? You can stamp them into metal seed plates. And to give you guys a story, we've actually had a client that sent their seed words to a trophy shop to have them engraved, right? So for best practices, you absolutely do not want to share these seed words with anyone. And if you're going to take the metal seed plate, you definitely want to make sure you stamp it yourself. You can also get a tamper-evident proof bag, right? I saw in the chat, right? If you have a safety deposit box, you can put it in a tamper-proof bag in that safety deposit box to show that if anyone tries to get access to it, you can see that it could potentially be compromised. And then, as mentioned before with the LastPass hack, you never want to take a picture of your seed words. You never want to store them on your phone. You never want to put them on access to the internet. That is a vulnerability that, could bite you in the long term. And then don't throw away any of your old seed phrases, from the fingertips and from the mouth of Satoshi himself. If you destroy an old seed phrase, and again, we're talking about a hard asset. If someone accidentally sends you Bitcoin to an old address, well, you still hold the keys to that address that you can get access to that Bitcoin too. And then lastly, you want to think critically when traveling with your keys. And we actually have 2 great pieces of content on our knowledge base and our blog posts that our content director, Stephen Hall, created. It's just tips to use when traveling or when moving and the best way to secure those seed words when you're traveling and changing destinations. And so on that, I'm going to pass the baton back to Tyler to wrap this up.
Awesome. Thank you. Now I want to end this with some action items. Again, I'm seeing the total number of people in this webinar. I'm looking at you, the person who has everything co-located in one area, whether you don't want to admit it to yourself or not. What I want to cover is your action item coming out of this webinar. It's going to be, if you have all of your private key elements, if they're in one location, take one seed phrase and separate it from the others, right? Start climbing that security mountain. Even if you just take the first step and that's all you're doing, that's so much better than a majority of Bitcoin savers, right? It's way better than those of people out there using, MetaMask wallet to trade Tyler coin. You're already orders of magnitude in a better position than those individuals. Now, when it comes to your Bitcoin wealth, you can get even better just by separating that one seed phrase backup. So make sure you do that as an action item, and then ensure your seed phrases, and I would say even, your hardware wallets as well, not in plain sight, right? Physically secured. Connor's point about a barrier to entry is really important. So if that's a lockbox, if that's a Faraday bag, if that's something that, make sure that it's not just out in the open, right? Even if it's in a secure room that only you go into, having something out in the open is not ideal. And then understand that security is a journey, and we have a dedicated team here to help you navigate through all this. We're established at block height 433,179, as noted on our seal to the right. We plan on being here for many, many more blocks. If you do have questions about this stuff, as Connor was highlighting, our content team is amazing. We try to think of these things before you do, so we have information prepared for you. So if you're moving residences, if you are going to be traveling with private key items, there's all of this stuff that you want to be thinking about, and we want to be here as a resource for you. So if you're individual, family, friends, there's people out there in your life that want to secure their Bitcoin better, be more than happy to talk to them too. Everything we do here at Unchained is to help you secure your generational Bitcoin wealth. So with that, I do want to just mention that these continuing education webinars, they're client exclusive, posted to YouTube later. They're really designed to empower you in your Bitcoin education through sharing a bunch of information from the experts. We have Justine, we have Connor, we feature other team members as well. So if you're watching out there on YouTube, thank you for coming to this session. Be on the lookout for more. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're going to be just pumping out quality content. That's kind of the name of the game in 2023. So make it your New Year's resolution. I'm going to do the cheesy line. Make it your New Year's resolution to take one seed phrase backup and separate it from the rest. Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We'll catch you next time.